Trading goods has long been how people get what they need, to produce something and provide it to others who traded for something they produced. Now, currency has become the middleman of the process, but civilization still trades goods and services. Everybody has something to provide and everybody has something they need. Sometimes, though, the product being traded is other human beings. In the late 17th century, a small island off the coast of Sierra Leone became the site of one of history's darkest chapters. Bunce Island, located about 20 miles or 32 kilometers upriver from present-day Freetown, was first settled by English slave traders around 1670. Despite its tiny size, measuring only about 1,650 feet or 500 meters long and 350 feet or 100 meters wide, the island's strategic position at the limit of navigation in Africa's largest natural harbor made it an ideal base for European slave merchants. During its early years, Bunce Island was operated by two London-based firms, the Gambia Adventurers and the Royal African Company of England. The latter was a crown-chartered company subsidized by the British government, which had official recognition from the British Crown. That period marked the beginning of Bunce Island's role in the transatlantic slave trade, although it was not immediately commercially successful. The establishment of Bunce Island served a dual purpose. While it was a trading post, it also acted as a symbol for English influence in a region where Portuguese slave traders had been established since the 1500s. The island's fortification and settlement by the English were part of a larger strategy to compete with other European powers in the lucrative slave trade. When the island began being used, a fortified trading post was constructed, which is commonly referred to as a slave castle. The fort had living quarters for the people operating the island and merchants, an office for administration, and slave-holding areas for male and female slaves. The fort also had cannons and lookout towers for protection, though the isolated area kept the place fairly well protected. That was until the island was raided by José López de Mora in 1728. He was a Luso-African competitor who was out to destroy the operation on the island, and it seemed as though he was successful. Due to the attack and the fact that the operation wasn't that profitable, the island was abandoned. The mid-18th century saw a significant shift in Bunce Island's operations. The island was taken over by private firms, marking the beginning of its most profitable and notorious era. In 1748, the London-based firm Grant Oswald and Company, founded by Scottish merchants Richard Oswald and Alexander Grant, took control of Bunce Island. That change in management led to a dramatic increase in the scale and profitability of the slave trade operations on the island. The private owners, unburdened by the constraints of crown-chartered companies, were able to ramp up trade to meet the rising demand for enslaved Africans in the Americas. During that period, the island sent thousands of captives to British and French-controlled islands in the West Indies and to Britain's North American colonies. The London-based owners grew wealthy from the castle's operations as Bunce Island became a highly profitable enterprise. The island's success was largely due to its specialization in providing enslaved Africans with specific skills. Bunce Island was located on the rice coast of West Africa, where farmers had been cultivating rice for hundreds of years. That expertise was highly valued by rice planters in coastal South Carolina and Georgia, who were willing to pay premium prices for enslaved people from the region. The relationship between Bunce Island and the American rice industry is exemplified by the business partnership between Richard Oswald, Bunce Island's principal owner, and Henry Lawrence, one of the richest rice planters and slave dealers in the colony of South Carolina. Lawrence acted as Bunce Island's business agent in Charleston, receiving human cargo from Sierra Leone, advertising and selling the captives at auction, and taking a 10% commission on each sale. That direct connection between Bunce Island and the American rice plantations made the slave castle uniquely profitable. It's estimated that during that period, approximately 3,200 Africans were sold into slavery every year from the Sierra Leone River area alone. The story of Bunce Island's slave trade began with the violent capture of innocent people. European traders, unable to secure enough enslaved Africans through peaceful commerce, formed military alliances with certain African groups. That strategy encouraged more extensive warfare, producing captives for trading. The result was a cycle of conflict and kidnapping that tore apart communities and families. Once captured, those unfortunate souls were brought to Bunce Island in smaller boats. The island's slave castle served as a holding point for these captives before their horrific journey across the Atlantic. Between the late 1600s and 1807, an estimated 30,000 people were sent into slavery from this tiny island. The layout of Bunce Island reflected the brutal nature of the slave trade. Men were confined to an open-air prison yard that offered no shelter, while women and children were given only slightly better accommodations. Guards kept a watchful eye from raised walkways, ready to quash any dissident with violence. The contrast between the captives' conditions and the stately factory house where the fort's commander lived created what historian Joseph Opala describes as, quote, a strange and unsettling character. The journey from Bunce Island to the Americas, known as the Middle Passage, was a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Ships would anchor at the island for months, waiting to be filled with human cargo. Once loaded, the captives faced horrific conditions aboard the slave ships. Men were immediately shackled together in pairs, their wrists bound by handcuffs and their legs fettered with iron. They were then forced into cramped quarters below deck, often so tightly packed that they could only lie on their sides. Women and children, while not usually shackled, were similarly confined in separate areas. The conditions were so cramped that standing upright was often impossible, especially in areas with platforms installed to maximize the number of captives. The air was stifling and disease spread rapidly in the unsanitary conditions. Alexander Falconbridge, a former slave ship surgeon, described the deck as resembling a slaughterhouse, covered in blood and mucus from sick captives. Many didn't survive the journey. Scholars estimate that between 10 and 19% of the millions of Africans forced into the Middle Passage died due to the brutal conditions on slave ships. The slave trade's impact on African communities was devastating and long-lasting. It disrupted social structures, economies, and cultural traditions. The constant threat of capture and enslavement created an atmosphere of fear and instability that persisted for generations. The trade also had significant demographic effects. It disproportionately targeted young, able-bodied individuals, leaving communities without their most productive members. That not only affected immediate economic productivity, but also had long-term implications for population growth and social development. Moreover, the slave trade intensified existing conflicts and created new ones as different groups were pitted against each other in the scramble for captives. That legacy of conflict continued to affect many African societies long after the official end of the slave trade. The impact extended beyond Africa's shores. Descendants of those enslaved at Bunce Island were scattered across the Americas, contributing to the rich but painful tapestry of the African diaspora. Unlike many other former slave trading facilities, Bunce Island holds a unique place in history as a point of origin that some African Americans can directly trace their ancestry to. The human cost of Bunce Island's slave trade was immeasurable. It represents not just the suffering of individuals, but the disruption of entire societies and the creation of lasting global inequalities. The downfall of Bunce Island as a slave trading hub began with a significant shift in British policy. In 1807, the British Parliament voted to abolish the slave trade. That decision marked the beginning of the end for Bunce Island's primary function. The following year, Freetown, located about 20 miles downriver from Bunce Island, became a crown colony. That development had far-reaching consequences for the slave trade in the region. The Royal Navy established its African Squadron in Freetown, sending regular patrols to search for slave vessels violating the newly imposed ban. That increased naval presence in the area made it increasingly difficult for slave traders to operate. As a result, Bunce Island's role as a major slave trading post came to an abrupt end. With the closure of its slave trading operations, Bunce Island's owners attempted to pivot to other commercial activities. British firms repurposed the island's facilities for various ventures. The castle was transformed into a cotton plantation, served as a trading post and a sawmill. However, those new endeavors proved to be economically unsuccessful. The island struggled to find its footing in the new economic landscape. The transition from slave trading to legitimate commerce was challenging, and Bunce Island's remote location and limited resources made it difficult to compete with other trading centers. The economic struggles of those new ventures led to the island's eventual abandonment. Around 1840, after years of unprofitable operations, the island was finally deserted. The once bustling slave castle, which had seen tens of thousands of enslaved Africans pass through its gates, fell silent. Following its abandonment, the buildings and stone walls of Bunce Island began to crumble. Nature slowly reclaimed the island, and the structures that had once been symbols of human cruelty and suffering were left to decay. That state of abandonment and decay has continued to the present day. Interestingly, the island's isolation and lack of development in the years following its abandonment have had an unexpected benefit for historical preservation. Unlike many other former slave trading sites, Bunce Island has not undergone significant reconstruction. That means that the island preserves intact evidence and artifacts that may have been lost elsewhere. The lack of human impact on the property since its abandonment has been very low, allowing the site to remain largely untouched. Today, there are no plans to rebuild the fort and castle on Bunce Island. Instead, the focus is on stabilizing the ruins and making them more comprehensible through interpretation strategies. That approach aims to preserve the site as a powerful reminder of the brutal history of the slave trade while allowing visitors to understand and reflect on its significance. Both the World Monuments Fund and the Zamani Project have created 3D models of the site as well as taken numerous pictures and video of the island's remnants. The decline and abandonment of Bunce Island marked the end of a dark chapter in history. From its establishment as a slave trading station in 1670 to its final abandonment in the 1840s, the island played a significant role in the transatlantic slave trade. Its ruins now stand as a somber monument to the countless lives affected by that inhumane practice, offering a tangible link to a past that must never be forgotten. Bunce Island has a crucial role to play in our understanding of history and its ongoing effects. As one of the few largely untouched former slave trading sites, it provides unique opportunities for research and education. By preserving and interpreting these ruins, we can honor the memory of those who suffered and deepen our grasp of the far-reaching impacts of slavery on both sides of the Atlantic. The site serves not just as a memorial, but as a powerful tool to encourage reflection on issues of human rights and social justice that continue to shape our world. Thanks for letting us tell you this sinister story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and hit like, rate it, or leave a comment. Join us next week when we'll take you somewhere sinister.